BloodStream is a Belief original.
A 360-degree look
at the bleeding disorders community.
The developments, the history,
the news,
and the people who shaped our world.
BloodStream is produced by Believe Limited.
Happy listening!
Hello and welcome to BloodStream, Episode 2, July 18th, 2016. I am your host, Patrick James Lynch. In this episode, you'll hear my interview with mountain climber and Save One Life board member Chris Bombardier, who, despite living with severe hemophilia B, is in the middle of his quest to climb the 7 summits, the highest peak on each of the 7 continents. He'll tell us why he's on this quest and explain an unexpected connection between climbing the world's tallest peaks and a certain segment of our population. That is coming up later, but now let's take a look at some news and updates from around the community. Every month, dozens of interesting, exciting, and meaningful stories that affect our community pop up. We'll take a close look at 3 of those stories in our Like, Share, and Comment segment, but first, a quick review of some of the major headlines from the past few weeks, starting with an update on a story we covered in Episode 1. MASAC publishes their recommendation regarding the SIPPET study. The National Hemophilia Foundation's Medical and Scientific Advisory Council, MASAC, has published their recommendation in response to the SIPPET study. The document can be found on NHF's website, hemophilia.org, or you can click the direct link in the Episode 2 program notes at bloodstreampod.com. I'll mention as well that I've published a piece analyzing MASAC's recommendation from a patient perspective, and that piece can also be found in the program notes for this episode. Co-8 DVI shipments are put on hold. The National Hemophilia Foundation has published Medical Advisory number 418 following Kendrion Biopharma's announcement that it is placing a voluntary temporary hold on future shipments of Co-8 DVI, the company's plasma-derived Factor VIII therapy. Kendrion does not expect any new shipments to go out until September 2016. If you are currently using Co-8 DVI, you should contact your healthcare provider to discuss options. This news also serves as a reminder that patients can sign up for the Patient Notification System. This is a service brought to you by the Plasma Protein Therapeutics Association, in which you will be notified directly about the latest recall or withdrawal of both plasma and recombinant products. That website is patientnotificationsystem.org. Gene editing technology about to be studied in people. An upcoming cancer study that would represent the first use of the gene editing tool CRISPR in people has passed a key safety review from the National Institutes of Health recently. While the study's focus will be on the use of CRISPR to fight cancer, CRISPR technology is also being studied for its potential to effectively cure hemophilia B. Though the technology is both exciting and FDA approved, some in the science community remain concerned about the potential and unknown side effects of DNA splicing. It's expected that this first use of CRISPR in people will be watched closely by many in the science community. The FDA approves 2 new products. The Food and Drug Administration has approved CSL Behring's Afstyla, the company's long-lasting recombinant Factor VIII product, for use by adults and children with hemophilia A. And the FDA has also approved the new combination pill Epclusa from Gilead Sciences. It is indicated for people with hepatitis C, both with and without cirrhosis, and is the first pill to treat all forms of the virus. NHF launches a new website for women with bleeding disorder symptoms. The National Hemophilia Foundation has launched betteryouKnow.org, a website for women and men who may experience symptoms of a bleeding disorder but have not been diagnosed. The site includes a risk assessment tool and information about bleeding disorders, as well as the next steps for those who seek care. That website is betteryouKnow.org. NHF publishes guideline on best practices for hemophilia management. An interesting development in the evolution of HTCs and clinical care. For the first time, the National Hemophilia Foundation has published an evidence-based clinical practice guideline on care models for hemophilia management. The guideline, published in partnership with McMaster University, was developed to identify best practices in hemophilia care delivery to optimize outcomes for people living with hemophilia across the United States. The guideline has been endorsed by the World Federation of Hemophilia, the American Society of Hematology, and the International Society on Thrombosis and Hemostasis, and it can be found in the July 2016 issue of the journal Hemophilia. We'll have a direct link in the program notes. National AIDS Monument adds hemophilia recognition. The National AIDS Memorial Grove and the HIV Story Project launched the next phase of their Surviving Voices education campaign by filming interviews with a few hemophilia community leaders who lived through the HIV/AIDS epidemic, including AIDS activist Jeannie White Ginder and National Hemophilia Foundation's CEO Val Bias. The project will culminate with the premiere of these videos as part of the Grove's World AIDS Day National Observance Program on December 1st, where the hemophilia community will also be honored with the National Unsung Hero Award. You can find details at aidsmemorial.org. HFA launches a community survey on HIV Memorial. In a related story to the previous one here, about remembering those affected by the blood contamination crisis, the Hemophilia Federation of America has launched a community survey to gauge interest in moving forward with a national memorial commemorating those lost as a result of contracting HIV or hepatitis C from contaminated blood products. If you are a community member interested in participating in the survey, you can find it on the HFA website, hemophiliafed.org, or by clicking the direct link in the Episode 2 program notes at bloodstreampod.com. And those are some of the headlines from around the community. For more on any of the stories mentioned here, check out the program notes for this episode on bloodstreampod.com, where you'll find all the appropriate links for more information. Up next in our Like, Share, Comment section, we'll take a look at two Michigan women's unlikely connection through bleeding disorders, two men with stories of triumph and perseverance despite living with hemophilia and HIV, and we'll take a look at a recent article on the marketing strategies of pharmaceutical manufacturers that I find troubling, and not for the reasons you might expect. That's next, right after this word from our presenting sponsor. This episode of BloodStream is brought to you in part by our presenting sponsor, Entertainment to Effect Change, a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating impactful and educational photo, video, film, and audio content that leads to positive change in the world. Entertainment to Effect Change, or E2AC, has partnered with Believe Limited to bring you BloodStream, but they do more than podcasts. Check out e2ac.org, that's E2ac.org, to see some of the awesome content that they have been creating. Everything from a feature-length documentary on a groundbreaking organization that aims to help children who stutter learn to love themselves and their stutter, to live meetups like Social Infusion, a gathering for adults attending Hemophilia Federation of America's annual symposiums and other large community meetings. E2AC, entertaining to effect change. As I said earlier, there are many stories that come out in a given month that we could spend time digging into, but we have to narrow it down to 3 for what we call our Like, Share, Comment segment. As with our headline segment, links to these stories can be found in the program notes for this episode, and with that, here are the Like, Share, and Comment stories for this month. I really liked a story published in NHF's spring 2016 issue of its signature publication, HemoWare, titled The X Factor, because it hits on 2 things that a lot of people in our community are working to bring more attention to: women with bleeding disorders and the particularly rare factor deficiencies. Factor 10 deficiency, which is the subject of this article, is one of the most rare bleeding disorders that we know of. If you have it, you're literally 1 in a million. At least that's the estimate. It's notoriously difficult to diagnose because it shares many symptoms with hemophilia A and B, as well as other bleeding disorders, and the exact symptoms that are expressed from patient to patient vary, so there's a little bit of a moving target. Judy Ann Peg Shunk, for instance, was incorrectly diagnosed with hemophilia B because of childhood bruising and bleeding. Similar bruising and bleeding episodes were experienced by Teresa Pavlak, and her brain bleeds actually resulted in an epilepsy. Unlike Peg Shunk, she was correctly diagnosed with Factor 10 deficiency as a child. The 2 women both live in Michigan and were first connected as pen pals through a bleeding disorders directory, which I didn't know one of those existed. Though there's a significant age difference between the 2 women, they bonded over their shared experiences and challenges for years before meeting in person. The story is touching and includes moving and eye-opening details about their lives, challenges, and treatment experiences. You can check the article out in the spring 2016 issue of HemoWare. Also, one positive, interesting, and related note, regarding treatments for factor X deficiency, last year saw a promising new development with the FDA's approval of a factor X concentrate called Coagidex. It's not yet indicated for prophylaxis, but is currently, and this is a direct quote, licensed for on-demand treatment of bleeds and to manage bleeding before, during, and after surgeries. So, in the worlds of awareness raising and resource creation, access to new therapies, we have progress. If you are a woman with a bleeding disorder, there's two important national resources that I want to make sure to mention. The Hemophilia Federation of America's Blood Sisterhood site and the National Hemophilia Foundation's Victory for Women site. Links to both of those will be in the program notes along with the link to the HemoWare article. And as I mentioned earlier, for anyone who is not diagnosed but believes that they are either at risk of having a bleeding disorder or are expressing symptoms of a bleeding disorder, check out the diagnostic resources at betteryouKnow.org. A story that I was inclined to share this past month was, well, it's actually two stories. Yes, I admit it, I'm cheating a little bit here, but there is a notable link between the two stories recently published featuring two community icons who frankly have beaten very unlikely odds and are now focusing much of their efforts on the most vulnerable members of the greater bleeding disorders community. Community member Randy Curtis was profiled in a recent NPR story called "Baby Boomers with Hemophilia Didn't Expect to Grow Old." Now reaching retirement age, Curtis, a lifelong activist for the bleeding disorders community and the current board chair of the Hemophilia Council of California, plans to spend his time volunteering to advance international care of hemophilia with the World Federation of Hemophilia and the National Hemophilia Foundation. Around the same time that NPR story came out, PositiveLight.com, a Canadian outlet for people with HIV, published an interview with community member and cross-country cyclist Barry Hardy in advance of Hardy's 5th transcontinental bicycle ride, which will raise funds for scholarships, micro-enterprise grants, and hemophilia camps for the international hemophilia community through the organization Save One Life. In 2012, Hardy became the first person with hemophilia and HIV to cycle across the United States, and he is currently undertaking, as I said, his 5th transcontinental trip. Both Curtis and Hardy were informed at early ages that they were likely to die before reaching adulthood. Hardy is now 50, Curtis is now 61, and both men are dedicating tremendous time and energy to bring attention and life-saving medicine to countries that find themselves where the United States did 50 years ago, with young people around the world facing a terrifying prognosis. I am quite proud to belong to a community that includes Randy and Barry, and I am proud to follow in each of their footsteps, or bike tracks. You'll find links to these stories as well as to Barry's Wheels for the World Facebook page where he's regularly posting updates from his ride, scheduled to continue through September 11th. And now a story I'd like to comment on. The hemophilia patient community's relationship to pharma, manufacturers, and specialty pharmacies is always scrutinized. And this year alone, a few pieces have been published on the subject, including an article in the medical journal PLOS Medicine, PLOS, titled Direct-to-Consumer Marketing to People with Hemophilia. This piece got some attention because at 3,700 words, it's uniquely exhaustive in its breakdown of the marketing techniques and strategies used by companies to reach people with bleeding disorders, and it cites things like donating to patient advocacy groups, creating educational resources, offering college scholarships, jobs, internships, career counseling, research grants, and much more. And yes, the article is suggesting that these are bad things. The piece argues that because individuals with hemophilia are significantly more involved in the deciding of which product to take when compared with patients in other therapeutic areas, and this is statistically backed, that pharma companies may be using marketing tactics to ultimately influence legislation and insurance policies by swaying patients toward advocating for specific products. In other words, the piece suggests patients are not being swayed by science, but by brand loyalty. Last component of the piece that I'll mention here before getting into my response is the following, and it's a portion directly lifted from the recommendations section that comes toward the end of the article. It reads, and I quote, "Ideally, hemophilia physicians and researchers would eschew speaking and consulting arrangements with factor manufacturers and distributors. Patients should make healthcare decisions in partnership with healthcare providers who have no conflicts of interest. Patients and healthcare providers should rely on non-industry funded sources of information, and factor manufacturers should have no role in funding patient groups, medical groups, or continuing medical education. This would require hemophilia organizations to forego industry funding, which may be difficult for a community that has become accustomed to industry support of both organizations and individuals. It is patients and payers, however, who may suffer economic harms from industry promotion." Okay. The component of this article that troubles me most is in that last piece I read. The recommendation that the community stops accepting all funding from pharmaceutical manufacturers and distributors. Well, let's look at this realistically. We have a robust economic engine created by the biotech, insurance, healthcare, and economic systems in this capitalistic country of ours. And we have a disease state in hemophilia that generates and costs, depending on your seat at the table, a tremendous amount of money. Put those two things together and we have a small number of companies with a lot of money, very keen on making an impact within our community. Are they trying to make sure they are competitively getting their name into the marketplace and into our minds? Of course they are. Are they using the creation of valuable resources like educational tools and community events to cement a place at the table? Of course they are. But for a community whose medicine costs astronomical sums and whose lifelong treatment needs require extraordinary commitments of time and money, the overwhelming majority of which goes to pharma and industry, can you really tell us that scholarships, internship opportunities, payment assistance programs, camps, research grants, patient organizations, advocacy tools, educational initiatives, and community events sponsored and supported by those industry players are a bad thing? As a community member who uses pharma and industry money to create educational tools, like this podcast, and as someone who has benefited from tools others have created with that money, like having received college scholarships, I can tell you unequivocally that the money, resources, and opportunity that flow back into the community are not just helpful or nice, they're critical to the improvement and quality of life that I and my fellow bleeders have experienced over the last 3 decades. But let's go further. Let's talk specifics. Rejecting pharma and industry funding entirely effectively dismantles the National Hemophilia Foundation and its 51 member chapters, the Hemophilia Federation of America and its 44 member organizations, the World Federation of Hemophilia, its 127 national member organizations, and its life-saving humanitarian aid program. Hemophilia camps, where kids learn self-infusion and independence, payment assistance to families in need, outreach to undiagnosed and underserved women with bleeding disorders, outreach to undiagnosed and underserved Spanish-speaking populations in the U.S., outreach to undiagnosed and underserved poor populations in the U.S., scholarships, internships, recruitment of and incentives for medical students to pursue hematology with a bleeding disorders expertise, already a huge issue facing our community. Why would we reject the only major dollars enabling the growth of our community instead of accepting that funding and ensuring the resources are used responsibly? Why not? Instead, empower responsible leadership on the boards and on the staffs of our patient organizations nationally and locally, who can both act as watchdogs on programs produced exclusively by pharma marketing teams and also guarantee that funding received by the organization from pharma companies is used appropriately and meeting real, tangible community needs. Barely 2 decades out from one of the great medical catastrophes in recorded history, which nearly wiped out our entire population, today we have strength. Strength in our patient organizations, research projects, advocacy efforts, educational initiatives. We are the envy of many of our peers in the greater rare disease community, a community of 30 million people in the U.S., and many of them would kill for the kind of community resources that we have. We have because our organizational leaders accept and responsibly administer industry funding. I believe many of us would have made these points if the authors had reached out to a handful of community leaders, but alas, they did not. And they did not, tellingly, include any counterpoints in the 3,700 words. Brazilian novelist Paulo Coelho is credited with the quote, "Don't waste your time with explanations, people only hear what they want to hear." Well, if he's right, my commentary here was a waste of time. Those who believe all industry money is bad can look at an article written with, in my opinion, a grossly myopic perspective and point to it as proof. And on the other side, the side of opportunity, growth, dynamic education, and engagement, those who believe that the resources produced with industry funding are by and large necessary and meaningful probably didn't need me to point that out. But for what it's worth, one last thought, and this is the bottom line. Without funding, we're left with virtually nothing but factor concentrates. And that's it. We strip ourselves of education, out of the right and ability to advocate for choice, and out of a community. I would welcome a well-vetted development plan for how we as a community could come up with the hundreds of millions of dollars in funding that we receive from industry. That would be really exciting to me, actually. But until one is presented, I struggle to take seriously a call to reject all industry funding. It just doesn't make sense. But that's just my 2 cents. What do you think? Let us know. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/BloodStreamPod. Tweet us at BloodStreamInfo or shoot an email to mailbag@BloodStreamPod.com. Coming up next, I sit down with community member Chris Bombardier during our time together at the Gateway Hemophilia Association's Family Education Weekend last month, where we discussed his life with hemophilia, his quest to climb the 7 summits, and a topic we both seem to enjoy and come back to quite a bit, what it means to be moving into your early 30s with hemophilia. We discuss all that and more right after this word from one of our sponsors. Once again, the presenting sponsor for this episode of BloodStream is Entertainment to Effect Change, a 501c3 dedicated to creating impactful and educational photo, video, film, and audio content that leads to positive change in the world. Visit E2AC, that's E as in Edward, 2 as in after 1, A as in Apple, C as in Charlie.org to learn more about the awesome content and incredible events that E2AC is a part of. E2AC, entertaining to affect change.
I just learned about podcasts like 6 months ago. I didn't even know that there was an app on my phone that had podcasts.
Yeah.
And then I found it and I was like, this is amazing.
Podcasts have gotten even more popular in the last couple of years. I mean, every few years with the digital stuff, I noticed the difference in like the 25-year-olds and what they know as opposed to us old men.
Old men.
So are you sick of being asked, like, why did you get into mountain climbing? Is that everyone's first question when they talk to you?
Generally, because I think it's kind of odd, especially for somebody with hemophilia, but I don't think a lot of people, I mean, I guess in Colorado there are quite a few people, but outside of Colorado and a few states like that, mountain climbing is a little different, a different activity to get into. And I don't know, there's just something really cool about climbing mountains that, you know, it's like this physical exertion that you kind of push yourself in very uncomfortable situations, and you get to see some really amazing places. And I think that's my real like reward for climbing is, you know, a lot of times you're climbing before sunrise and you see the sunrise come up while you're on these beautiful mountains, and I don't know, it's pretty wild. And I don't know, and then overcoming that just uncomfortable situation and getting to the summit of this cool mountain, I don't know, it's just this amazing experience and reward, you know.
Sometimes you climb solo and sometimes with others. Is that correct? Is it different each time?
Mostly when I do the big mountains, I have a group of people that I've met on other climbs that that I climb with. I have a guide that I climb with pretty much exclusively, mainly because he's super comfortable with my hemophilia. I've taught him how to infuse,
Nice.
emergency situations, how to access veins, and if we're climbing and something bad happens.
Have there been any incidents that have been even somewhat frightening or scary with regard to the hemophilia?
Not specifically with hemophilia.
Just general mountain scariness?
Yeah, there's been some moments where I was just like, what am I doing up here? Like, this is really uncomfortable,
Well, like, what are some of the, what are the stories?
One of them was we were coming down from the summit of Denali, and this storm kind of came in pretty quickly, and it was just a whiteout. We kind of described it as like hiking in a cotton ball. It's just white everywhere. And we were coming down, and we couldn't even see. You put these little bamboo wands in the snow to like mark your trail because it's just white, and it's hard to keep. There's no like defined trail.
Right, you need to like leave your own breadcrumbs and markers along the way.
And they're generally like 15, 20 feet apart, and we couldn't find the next one. It was just that dense. I actually turned around on the rope, and I could barely see the person standing behind me. And they were only like 30 feet away, and I could just see the rope kind of going there. And there's a third person on our rope that was completely gone. Like, couldn't see him at all. And that was scary. But luckily, the clouds broke just enough that we could pick up our trail again and start moving. But
in situations like that, how do you, talking about going to the gym or just being physically active with hemophilia and navigating that line between pushing yourself in a safe and productive way and pushing yourself beyond what you should be.
Yeah.
When you're on a mountain, like who makes that call? Is that the guide who's the one that has to say, like, you know what, we may have to turn around here?
Sometimes they're definitely more concerned about the weather, and they've been on these mountains before, so they understand the weather a little bit more than I would know. So they would make that call, but it's really important for, like, if I'm not feeling good, I have to communicate that to the guide and say, like, I think I'm done today and I need to turn around. Which I haven't had to do yet. There's been moments where I've felt like I should, maybe, or not like I should, but it was questionable. Like, I was tired and pretty burnt out. But that's just kind of mountaineering in general, is like being in that miserable state and like trying to just
battling
convince yourself.
Yeah. No, this is fun. I'm having a good time.
Yeah.
Everything's fine.
They call it type 2 fun.
Type 2 fun?
Yeah, so type 1 fun's like roller coasters. It's awesome. Instantaneous, like, adrenaline rush. Type 2 is like, oh, that was kind of uncomfortable, but I'm really glad I did it. Like, that was good. I'd probably do it again. And then there's type 3 fun, which is like, oh, I'm really glad I did that, but I never want to do it again. And I've been borderline, like, type 2.5, I guess. That was Denali in Alaska. That was like almost a 3, but
yeah. So name the 5 that you've climbed so far of the 7 summits.
I've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, which is Africa's highest peak. Aconcagua, which is South America's highest peak in Argentina. Mount Elbrus, which is Europe's highest peak in Russia. Mount McKinley or Denali in Alaska, which is North America's highest peak. And then Karsten's Pyramid, which was in Papua, Indonesia. And that's called Australasia's highest peak, which is like Australia, New Zealand, and Papua, that was a pretty wild experience.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
Like, I don't think I've ever been to such a primitive place. Most people have heard of Papua New Guinea, but the other half of the island is Papua, Indonesia. And, we hiked through the jungle for 5 days and, came upon, like, we stayed in this village that's just these wood shacks, and it felt like you were in National Geographic, like the guys are just walking around with the gourd on and, like, no other clothes, and, like, the pigs sleep inside with everybody. And
oh, wow.
You just throw sweet potatoes in the little fire that keeps them warm. And that's how you eat there. It was cool.
And so you have 2 left. It's Everest, and what's the last one?
Mount Vinson. It's in Antarctica.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And has there been any particular reason for the order of which you've climbed them?
Kili, I started with that one, generally because that's considered the easiest of the 7 summits. And I happened to be going to Africa for a project helping set up a hemophilia lab and clinic. Mm-hmm. So that kind of just got the ball rolling. And
Everest is slated for next spring, right?
Correct, yeah, next spring, like April and May. next year.
And then do you have the final one marked in the calendar somewhere as well in your mind's eye?
Well, I'm hoping it will be the winter after that, like December, January, which is summer down there. Ready to knock them off.
Yeah?
Yeah, finish it up.
So putting mountain climbing aside, what else have you noticed as a person? It's been interesting to me turning 30. I feel like, we're a part of this first healthy generation, so to speak, which is really cool. We will be a part of the largest population that sees senior citizen age with hemophilia, which is really cool. There's so many things we don't know about aging with hemophilia, which is a little frightening, but I get it. And all right, we're going to sort of be the big population to guinea pig that phase of life. But I've noticed just turning 30, like my body is changing. We talked a little bit about this before we started recording. What are some of the things that you've noticed in your body as you've gotten a little bit older with hemophilia?
Yeah, I definitely notice just when I go to the gym, I have to really ease into like new workout plans, and because I'll get crazy little bleeds, and then it'll set you back a week, and that's been a big one. And can't do kickball apparently. So I had recently injured myself playing kickball. And I think it's just I didn't stretch because you're like, it's kickball. Why do I need to stretch?
Right.
But turns out when you're 30, you should stretch before you play kickball.
Stretching is saving my life. I have found, and I'm not going to pretend to be any kind of yogi or yogic person or whatever the title is, but with my fiance is a yoga instructor, so she,
that's nice.
Yeah. So and she talks the talk, she walks the walk, and she knows why I should be doing both as well. But I have found, even in these last 7 days, even in the last week, I'm like, oh, my just general body feels so much better. I didn't need to do this for maintenance when I was 20 the way I definitely do now that I'm 30.
I totally agree. Yoga has been a huge benefit. And, early in my 20s, I was like, yoga? Who does yoga? I thought it was just ridiculous, and then I did it for the first time, and it was such an amazing workout. And you're right, you feel great after you do it, and just waking up in the morning, I don't have as many aches and pains.
Stop the Bleeding has been recognized with major awards from organizations such as the Hemophilia Federation of America and the National Hemophilia Foundation, and you can find all of the Stop the Bleeding episodes and additional content at stbhemo.com, including our episodes from Season 6, which just launched only a few weeks ago. stbhemo.com. Let's talk for just a minute about camp and not camp specifically as much as working with younger people in the community, which is obviously a part of camp. Are there other ways in which that you are actively working with kids, teens, young adults in the community? Yeah.
Besides camp, we started this program in Colorado called Backpacks and Bleeders, which is really cool. Just trying to get kids outside, it's surprising how many people that live in Colorado don't hike or don't do outdoor activities, which I find really fascinating because it's such a cool resource that we have right outside our city.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is just people don't know how to start, they don't know. They're like, oh, hiking, mountain climbing, where do you start with that? And I think we're just trying to provide that opportunity to hey, meet us at this trailhead. We're going to explain what kind of gear you need to bring. This is a really easy trail. This is how you pack your backpack. This is the essentials to bring. And our hope is that people will get comfortable with that, enough with that they'll go out on their own and kind of try and keep that healthy lifestyle up.
That's really cool.
So we take kids, on a 14er every year, which is a 14,000-foot mountain in Colorado, and teach them how to do that safely. And that's a really fun experience. And we have programs for hikes for little guys, little family hikes, so they can bring their little kids along and hopefully get them interested and young.
Neat.
So that's been really fun.
So every year you do that?
Yeah, we do programs throughout the year. So we've been doing it. We started it in 2013.
So it's that 14,000-foot climb. That's the once a year event?
Yeah, that's once a year.
But there's programs around the year.
Yeah. We do snowshoeing to kind of show people they can do stuff in the winter, indoor rock climbing, and just having people experience a lot of things that you can do in Colorado on your own if you learn how to do it the right way.
Yeah, you sometimes you have to just start, and
exactly.
If you get somebody to show up to a rock climbing wall, it might not take much more to get them up on a 14,000-foot mountain.
Exactly, yeah, and we've kind of seen that. It's only been a couple of years, but people are coming back, and the program's growing, and hopefully people are getting comfortable in the outdoors and they can start hiking on their own, because it's just such a cool world, and hiking not expensive. You can do it in any state. There's state parks and national parks everywhere. And some really cool places to see in this world. How
long does that mountain take? The 14,000-foot hike?
Do it in a day. It depends. There's 53 of them in Colorado, but we usually tend to go to the kind of easier beginner hikes, and it could take about 4 or 5 hours to go up, and then a couple to get down. Sometimes longer to get down because of people having bad ankles or knees and things like that.
Right.
And it's very rocky, so we take our time and make sure everybody treats beforehand. And but we've had a couple guys with target ankles that have still done the 14er, and
all right.
It's really cool to see them.
When is it happening?
I think it's in August sometime. I'll let you know.
Whoa, this August?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think I could make that.
Well, it'll be next August too. So.
All right. Yeah, I gotta give myself a physical challenge to prep myself for. I need that incentive. And I want to touch base a little bit with you've kind of already hit on how these 7 summit climbs have taken you around the world, which is an amazing kind of ancillary benefit, I suppose, to the climbs themselves. Now, was it? Actually, I don't know this. Were the climbs what introduced you and got you working and volunteering for community in the developing world, or did that predate the climbing?
They kind of happened at the same time. It's actually really interesting. So I was working in the Hemophilia Research Lab in Colorado, and my boss, she'd been working in that lab for 35 years. So she's one of the, hemophilia lab gurus. She knows everything. She got invited to go to Kenya and help set up a lab and clinic there with actually Indiana's Hemophilia Treatment Center. And she needed some help setting it up there. And I was like, yeah, I'll go to Kenya and help you set up a lab. And that's when I kind of did some research and found out Mount Kilimanjaro was 200 miles away. I was like, well, this is the perfect time to start my quest for the 7 summits. So kind of went for it there and started planning the trip. And right before I left, I went to Nacho. It's that Hemophilia Camp Conference. And Lori Kelly did a presentation about Save One Life and just the struggles of people with hemophilia in the developing world. And I don't know if I was just naive or blissfully ignorant, I guess, about what hemophilia is like in other places. But she showed some pictures of people with bleeds. I didn't have a visual until then, and it really hit me hard. So I just approached her after that, and I was like, I want to be more involved. I'm going to Kenya, and it's kind of gone from there. And when I went to Kenya the first day we went to the hospital, and there was a boy there that I think it was super clear that he had hemophilia. To our team, his joints were swollen. He couldn't walk. He had come in with abdominal pain, and they just cut his appendix out. No factor. He probably just had a bleed. Probably didn't have appendicitis, and he was just bleeding out. And
wow,
it was the life-changing moment. So, after being there for 2 weeks, helping in the lab and clinic there, and that boy actually survived and left the hospital while we were there, which was incredible.
Jesus.
But I climbed Kili the week after that, and standing on the summit of that mountain where that boy with hemophilia lived only a couple 100 miles away and was struggling so much with hemophilia, just changed my whole perspective on what the climbs could be, and they could be about raising awareness for these people that can't climb mountains. They can barely survive with hemophilia. So that's kind of where that whole it changed from just about me wanting to climb mountains to hopefully being more impactful than that. So that was a pretty powerful trip.
And you've connected some of the climbing to fundraising efforts as well, right?
Yeah, that Kili climb was actually part of a fundraiser for Save One Life. Not all of them have been big fundraisers, just because not a lot of people don't know what mountains I'm climbing. They don't understand what's so cool about it. So I kind of informally have tried to use them to raise awareness for Save One Life, and I feel like it's gaining some momentum. So
I would say so. I mean, I know when I first heard about you and your work, I heard about it in conjunction with Save One Life. So I think that's a positive, you know, if people hear about you and what you're doing and immediately have an association, not even necessarily to Save One Life, but just to the developing world. If there's a connection between, Chris is climbing these mountains and raising awareness about hemophilia around the world, and most of the world doesn't have the access to care. Yeah,
and I think that, you know, it kind of brings an interesting point to light, too, that it's just the disparity in care between developed countries and developing countries, period, you know. Just going to the hospitals, like you've been to Senegal and seen what healthcare is in those countries compared to the U.S., you know, it's just such a dramatic thing. And, you know, I feel like if there's some way I can help these guys that have the same condition I have a little bit of better life, you know, a little bit more access to care, you know, I feel like that's worth any effort that I can put in. So
you can't unsee, like you will never forget about this boy with the appendix and your experience there. And I will not forget the people that we talked to in Senegal. And well, I would like to think for anyone who is operating with a certain consciousness, it becomes very hard to then not make that a part of what motivates you going forward and where you put your energy and resources going forward.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much my motivation. I actually carry a picture of another boy that I met in Kenya that just really touched me, and I carry it with me on my climbs. And when I have a bad day on the mountain, like I'm just tired and sick of sleeping in a tent and on snow and stuff, I just look at that picture and I'm like, this guy can't. He never even had the chance to. Like, I'm choosing to do this, and I can work through this like exhaustion and keep going.
And I think that's really touching. And I think that applies as well. And I've drawn similar motivations, not for extraordinary feats like mountain climbing, but just on a day-to-day level, reminding myself that I have had conversations with people who would do anything to have the access that I have to care and to the life that I have. I can't give it to them, but I can live an empowered life, and I can live a really good life. And that's actually, I think that's worth something. I think that alone is, in a way, a certain act of generosity. And I could do so much better, and I know I could. But I think there's an act of generosity when the moment's presented me an opportunity to learn what I can do to actively help with the disparity of care around the world, but also to live as empowered a life as I can because I have been gifted the ability to do so, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, just when I'm on climbing these mountains and stuff, I think about that a lot, and so lucky and thankful that I have what I have. And I try not to get down on myself for silly little things, you know, like, it still sucks having bleeds, and I still struggle with that when they happen. But I also kind of think back, like, you know, at least I have treatment. At least I know this pain has an end to it. So where these guys they don't have that hope, you know.
It's crazy, like, just zooming out once in a while and thinking about, man, if we were born 5 years earlier, if we were born in a different country, like, it's almost impossible to wrap my mind around the reality of you and I sitting here as two 30-year-old guys with severe hemophilia. You're climbing mountains, I'm jet setting all over the place, you know, have my own company, and like just how this was not in the cards for our community up until the mid to late 80s in this country, and is still not the case for approximately 80% of the world. It's isn't it, like,
it's mind-blowing. Like, I don't know how we got so fortunate, but I'm definitely gonna try and take advantage of it and live my life to the fullest, you know. And I think we're both kind of embodying that. And, it's pretty wild. I don't understand how that works sometimes, but
I don't either. And I don't think that everything happens for a reason, but I do think everything that happens provides an opportunity. And we are taking that opportunity, and we have to keep taking that opportunity because that's what you do with a gift. You use it.
Exactly.
So we have a couple minutes left here. I'm curious to know from you, in our last episode of BloodStream, we talked briefly about how it's a pretty great time from an advocacy standpoint and from a biotech standpoint. I'm curious to know, you're really active in the community, so when you're kind of looking ahead a little bit at what's coming up in the general state of our community, what's something that is particularly inspiring or empowering to you, and what's something that you foresee as a challenge or an obstacle that's coming up?
I think going back to the ACA as just such a positive thing, well, especially for me personally, climbing mountains and following this dream, I don't think it would have happened without the ACA. Being inside for 50 hours a week or whatever I was working, and it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And luckily the ACA happened, and I left the job. That job, got insurance through the marketplace, and got to kind of pursue passions and try and figure out what I truly wanted to do with my life. Something that, just before that wouldn't have been possible. I would have had to stay at that job just to keep insurance, and that was really life-changing for me. I think the new products coming out are just going to be life-changing, and I hope if they, get through all the clinical trials and
right.
stuff. But just having these options is incredible. I remember I didn't even know there were no options really for B. There was like one recombinant and one plasma derived, and that's what you took.
For those who are not as familiar with the community, most people with hemophilia have hemophilia A, which is a factor VIII deficiency. The second most common is hemophilia B. But what actually, offhand, I don't know what the numbers are, the amount of people who have B.
I'm not really sure either.
Yeah. So
I think there's like either between 2,000 or 4,000 of the hemophiliacs in the United States have B. It's a pretty small number.
Yeah, significantly smaller than the also small number of people with hemophilia A, but relatively speaking, significantly smaller. So that has been one of the factors, pun not intended but accepted, that led to there being less products available for people with hemophilia B.
Right. Yeah, and it's been really cool. I think there's been like 3 or 4 new products just for hemophilia B, and it's kind of wild to have a choice. Which is great, and I think that's great. I think there will be some challenges as far as insurance goes, though, that will start creeping up, even with the ACA. I think health insurance is always going to be a struggle in our community, and we just need to really advocate for our needs. I know I went to Washington Days and through the National Hemophilia Foundation, and I felt like our voice was really heard, and I hope that continues, and I know that's going to be crucial to our lives.
Is there anything else that maybe people don't ask you or know about you that you'd like to share?
Ooh, good question.
No, I just kind of put you on the spot there.
I guess a new exciting thing is I'm going back to school, and I'm really excited about doing that, getting a master's in global health. And I think actually going to Kenya and working with Save One Life has really inspired me to at least take this step towards learning more about the global health system and how that works, and maybe how I can make a difference in that in some way. So I'm pretty excited about that. I just started last week, so real fresh.
Yeah, wow, I didn't realize it was that fresh. Well, congratulations, that's fantastic.
Thanks.
And where can people follow what you're up to, your climbs and your just general adventures? Where can people find you?
Yeah, so I have a website called adventuresofahemophiliac.com. Also have a Facebook page with the same name, and Twitter at AdventureHemo. Not a great at the
Not profound on the Twitter
on
the Twitter game.
Still learning the whole hashtagging thing too is beyond me, but I'm getting there.
We'll help. We'll have a little tutorial when we get off here, and all the links to where you can find Chris as well will be in the program notes from episode 2. Chris, thanks so much for sitting down and chatting with me for a little while today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Patrick.
Of course. BloodStream would once again like to recognize our interview sponsor, Stop the Bleeding. Stop the Bleeding, the comedic web series about bleeding disorders that uses entertainment and digital content to educate and empower our community. You can find all of the episodes and our additional content, such as the behind-the-scenes videos and our unique STB activity book, by visiting our website, stbhemo.com. That's S for Samuel, T for Thomas, B for Bravo, Hemo for Hemophilia, stbhemo.com. I want to thank Chris for sitting down with me in St. Louis last month. He was there to participate in an event that I was producing, a nationwide live event series called Powering Through, and he flew in on no sleep after spending a week volunteering at Alaska Hemophilia Association's summer camp. Talk about powering through. I guess you learn stamina when you're training to climb mountains. To learn more about Chris, follow along with his adventures, and see content from his previous ones, visit adventuresofahemophiliac.com. It's not lost on me that in these first 2 episodes, BloodStream has featured 4 prominent community members, Glenn Pierce, Barry Hardy, Randy Curtis, and Chris Bombardier, all of whom are dedicating a significant portion of their time to helping our bleeding brothers and sisters in the developing world. So what's going on? Is there an upward trend in global awareness, or am I just biased toward thinking big and seeking out those who are doing the same? Maybe both? Maybe something else? What do you think? Tell us. You can email us at mailbag@bloodstreampod.com, find us on Facebook at facebook.com/bloodstreampod, or connect with us on Twitter at bloodstreaminfo. You can subscribe to BloodStream on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, or wherever you're listening. And if you enjoy this podcast, the best thing you can do to help ensure we are able to keep making it is share this episode and share our social media outlets with friends and family. Encourage them to check out the show too. Word of mouth is our best friend. BloodStream would like to thank our presenting sponsor, E2AC Entertainment to Effect Change, for their support of this episode. E2AC.org to learn more about this nonprofit organization's dedication to creating impactful, educational photo, video, film, and audio content. E2AC.org. E2AC, entertaining to effect change. BloodStream is written by Lauren Fee and Ryan Gielen and me, Patrick James Lynch, produced by Andrew Gall, Rob Bradford, Ryan Gielen, and me, and edited by Andrew Gall. Special thanks to everyone at Believe Limited Entertainment to Effect Change, and to the community members who lent their voice to our oh-so-charming opening bumper. A reminder to check out the program notes for this episode on bloodstreampod.com for links and additional information about the various stories and individuals featured on this episode. My name is Patrick James Lynch, and until next time, take self-care of yourself.